Hello, my friend, and welcome to a spontaneous satsang. When I was around 12 years old, I read a book of short stories by J.D. Salinger called 10 Stories, I think was the title. And one of the stories was called Teddy. Teddy was a story about a young boy who was, I think, like 9 years old, who was fully enlightened. And at one point, a reporter had asked him, when did he first discover that he was enlightened, that he was awake? And he said he was about, I think, maybe 7, 8 years old. And he was sitting at the breakfast table with his young sister. And he watched his young sister drinking milk. And he realized that it was God pouring God into God. And this one sentence had a profound effect on me. I was 12 years old at the time. I think I was around 12. And it has stayed with me ever since. It just really struck me in a very profound way. God pouring God into God. And when I was quite young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, I had an experience of, I guess what we call oneness. I would be sitting out in the woods. It happened quite often. I would be sitting out in the woods by myself, and I would just feel connected to everything. Maybe you've had this experience yourself. I just felt connected to everything, to the sky, to the land, to the leaves, to the birds, to the squirrels, everything that was around me. I felt connected with, and there was just such a wonderful, experience of great peace, happiness, and love. It just was overcome with this. And then as I started getting closer to 12, I didn't have these experiences as much anymore. But when I read this book, it brought all that back to me as a direct experience, something as a direct experience. There was an inner knowing that knew that those words, God pouring God into God, really meant something, that they were a deep and profound teaching that wasn't taught to me in most of the rest of my life. It was something that wasn't mentioned or talked, but it was a feeling that felt very true. It was a feeling coming from the essence of what I am, from my true being. So it was a wonderful thing to read, God pouring God into God. I mean, he could have gone further and said God was observing God pouring God into God. And because often we think, and I've had people as they begin to wake up that have been working with me, this has happened a number of times, people write to me and say, I was sitting on my back porch, and as the people walked by, I saw that everyone was God. And the sky was God, and the birds were God, and everything I saw was God. And which is a wonderful awakening and a wonderful opening to being able to see beyond the duality, beyond the thought structure coming from language of dividing the world up into everything, deconstructing that and coming back to your original nature of seeing that everything is one. Everything is one. The difference there is the observer is still this I. The observer is still the self. So the observer is also God. And that's the full realization of non-duality is the subject and object are the same. There's no longer subject and object. There is just the totality, just the oneness. But God pouring God into God is a good way of seeing it because it deconstructs this illusion that we have of differences, this illusion that we have of separation. Because when we learn language, we're dividing the world up into names and forms that are all different. We wouldn't be able to speak if all we saw was God pouring God into God. It's all God, and God is observing it. And we can use the words pouring as also God. God, Godding God into God. So every word would just be God. Every thought would just be God. And that's how we come back into this awareness of oneness, which is real. which is true, which is our true nature and the true nature of the world, the true nature of everything. It's not separate. It never has been separate. It's never been anything like separate. But our language and our conditioning teaches us that everything is separate. I'm separate from the world, and the world is divided into all these separate names and forms. The tree, the squirrel, the grass, the sky, the clouds, the sun, humans, animals, it's all different. It's all separate. But in reality, it's not. Non-duality is reality. There is no separation. And so one of the ways to get to that direct experience of it, because it has to be a direct experience, it can't be a thought experience. Thoughts are what are keeping us from this direct realization, from this direct experience. Thoughts are what are keeping us from this. So non-duality can't be a thought. It has to be a direct experience. But one of the things that we can do is we can deconstruct our thoughts. This whole complex structure of thoughts in the way that we see the world and perceive ourselves and see everything else, including our experiences, feelings, everything, divided up into these different names and forms and all this separation. We can deconstruct that illusion by simply saying, just calling everything God for a moment. And if you do this often enough, you may begin to start having that experience, the direct realization of oneness. Come back to your true self, your true nature, your source. Come back to that again by letting go of all these thoughts and differences, and have that direct experience of God pouring God into God. Throughout Zen koans, there's many stories of a monk coming to the Zen master and asking, what is Zen? What is enlightenment? What is Buddha? What is Buddha nature? These are just words, same as God. He could have easily been saying, what is God? And the Zen master, one Zen master would point to a cypress tree in the courtyard and said, the cypress tree in the courtyard. Another would say it's the stick used to clean the outhouses. Another one would say it's ordinary mind. Another might say it's a rock or a mountain or a river. What they're pointing at is non-duality. Yes, that's true. The cypress tree is God, is Buddha nature, is enlightenment, is Zen. And the shit stick is also God, enlightenment. It's the same. There is no separation. Everything you point to is it. And he could have easily, just as easily as said, you. What is God? You. You are God. You are Buddha nature. You are enlightenment. You are Zen. You are God. You are God maybe right now thinking, I am not God. You are God right now maybe thinking, I don't understand what you're saying. You are God right now saying, bullshit, I don't believe this. You are God right now saying, I don't feel it. I don't feel that I'm God. I feel that I'm a separate person. You are God saying, I feel that I'm a separate person. But you're God. You're God thinking this. You're God saying this. And if you see everything as God, if you see everything as God without any separation, everything is Buddha nature, everything is Zen, everything is enlightenment, everything is one. You don't need those words, God, enlightenment, Zen, anymore. It all becomes one, as it is. It may feel to you that it's becoming one, but you're just letting illusion go. You're deconstructing the dream. You're deconstructing illusion so that you can experience what's really here. It is all just one. So you may see me, Peter, speaking to you on this screen, but it's just God speaking and God listening. God hearing, God speaking. And even the verbs can be seen for what they are, just God. So we deconstruct the illusion of thoughts. We deconstruct the illusion of language and return to our original nature. That's what our original nature is. When Ramana Maharshi had his profound awakening, one of the things that he has often said is when the self is realized, the self with a capital S, the true self, when the self is realized, the world disappears. Why does the world disappear? The world of name and form disappears. The world of thoughts disappears. So only the self is there. We could say only God is there, only Zen is there, only Buddha nature is there, only whatever word we want to use as a single word, as one word to describe everything. And this is how we deconstruct this world of illusion, this world of dreams, and are able to see our true self, because the true self, everything is the true self. The world, the sky, the squirrel, the birds, each person, everything, the stars, it's all the same thing. It's all the true self. It's all God. It's all Zen. It's all Buddha nature. It's all the exact same thing. We're just using one word. We don't need any word. Because anything we think about God is not it, is it? It's just another way of returning to the illusion of separation. And the direct experience, the direct feeling of this oneness, is the realization of it. When the self is realized, the world of name and form and illusion disappears, and what's left is just one. Just one. God pouring God into God. This is a very profound thing. It was for me anyways. I mean, it really, it brought me back to that experience that I had as a 4 or 5-year-old child sitting alone out in the woods and just being one with everything. It brought back that experience to me, which is truth. It's a realization. A child can have it. It's not about education or knowledge or spiritual learning. I had none of that as a 4 or 5-year-old. I didn't even hear the word God until years later. Then I look back and go, oh, that was the presence of God, is what I called it. But at the moment that I was experiencing it, there was no words to describe this. It just felt wonderful. That's all. You know, it just felt wonderful. And when I read these words from J.D. Salinger in this short story, it also had this effect on me. It was the whole book was filled with wonderful short stories. J.D. Salinger was a wonderful writer, but that one phrase, that one God pouring God into God, that just really stood out. It was the first time that I'd heard truth. Up until that time, 12 years I'd been existing as a little human on this planet, this time. And that was the first time that I'd heard truth. And when you hear truth, sometimes it affects you in a realization. It can direct you and point you to the direct experience of truth, which I hope I'm doing now. I hope these words are just pointing you to a direct experience of oneness. And this is something that you can practice with in a way of deconstructing your mind of illusion and separation. that everything you see, you could say, that's God. Everything you feel, that's God. Everything you think, that's God. You are God, seeing God. You are God, experiencing God. And there is nothing outside of God. There is nothing outside of true self, or Buddha nature, or Zen, or whatever word you want to use to describe this. This is non-duality. Non-duality has to be experienced. And it can be because it's real. It can be because it's true. We have a lot of things in the way, don't we? A lot of thoughts, a lot of conditioning in the way, but that's fine. That's fine because truth is still here. Truth has never been altered in any way by our conditioning and our thoughts and our ignorance and our delusions. Truth has never been touched by this. Suffering has never touched it. Truth has always remained exactly as it is, pure, non-dual, one. I hope you can feel this, my friend. I hope you can feel the reality of this.